Hello there, it's Sarah from Paper Lovely. Thanks for joining me today. I'm here with my 10 cards 1 kit using the My Monthly Hero for April. First things first, I want to congratulate the winner of my giveaway for my 100th video, which is Yolanda Rivera. Yolanda, please send me an email with your mailing address and I will get your package out to you this week. So just a quick life update before I get started. I'm sorry I'm so late getting this out. My allergies went haywire, not this last week, but the week before, and I was down all week. Like, we're talking on the couch as soon as I got home from work, and when I'm not crafting in the evenings, like, you know I'm sick. So I'm a little bit behind, but I spent last week working on the cards, and I'm uploading this tonight. Hopefully Monday it will be posted, and if I have enough time, I'm going to edit the second half this evening, and hopefully I will have part 2 up for you tomorrow. Okay, so let's jump into card number 1. Here I'm just showing you, I trimmed out the pretty border that came in the die set, and then I just cut off the edges. So I'm just showing you the 2 smaller floral sections that I'm going to be using, and this first card is pretty simple. I took both of those and just placed them together on the top of a Nina panel trimmed to 4x5 1/4. And here I'm using my Nuvo glue just along that bottom or top stripe, whichever way it's facing. And then I just placed a few glue dots behind the floral and sort of fern lacy sections. So I'm gonna line those up, and I do then pull in my ruler to make sure that I've got it nice and straight. And then I'll go ahead and do the same thing with the bottom one, just flipping that so it's a mirror image. And then I'm going to take my trimmer. I didn't like the little bit of white edge that was peeking out there, so I'm just going to trim those so that I have the purple running off the edge of my panel. And next I went and took the happy birthday sentiment from the stamp set. I've lined that up towards the bottom, and I'm going to stamp that using Simon Says Stamp Intense Black ink. Next, I wanted to add some of this beautiful purple ribbon that came in the kit, so I'm using my 1/8 of an inch Scor-Tape, and I'm not sure why I did this because my ATG gun would have held it just fine, but that was the choice I made at the time for some reason. So I'll peel off the backing, and I'm just doing this so that the back of my ribbon will hold nice and strong for me while I'm tying my bow. So I'll go ahead and I knot this, and then I create the loops for my bow. And I will fast forward a bit here because it does take me a little while to get my bows tied. There we go. And I'm just gonna trim off the edges. And I think this card is so pretty. It's very simple, but I think that bow just makes it so elegant. And I will go ahead then and secure that down with a glue dot just to make sure my bow isn't gonna go anywhere. Okay, for the inside of the card, I'm again working on a Nina panel trimmed to 4x5 1/4. I've pulled out the sentiment Fiesta Time, and I'm going to stamp that using Simon Says Stamp Intense Black ink. And then I pulled out a few of the small flourishes, and I just lined those up on my card base, and I picked up those together with my block so that I would have matching for either side. And I'm stamping this using Distress Oxide Seedless Preserves. Next, I'll go ahead and attach my top panel using my ATG gun, and then I'll place in that inside panel. And I should mention, this is MFT's eggplant cardstock that I used for the base of the card. And that will complete card number 1. For card number 2, I'm going to create a chorus line of some of those dancing mice. So I wanted to use the frame over top of that. There I was just measuring out to make sure I had her in a good place. Now I'm stamping this out using Simon Says Stamp Intense Black ink, and off camera I had stamped this on some Ink-a-Dink-a-Doo masking paper, so I have gone ahead and already stamped and trimmed out a mask to match her. And I did even go inside and trim out the portion in between her dress and her arms because I knew I would probably have some things peeking through there. So there you saw me lay down my mask, and now I'm going to stamp this back row. And then because I only wanted to cut out one mask, even though I knew I was going to need a partial for both of the girls in the front, I'm going to stamp this other front one first, and then I'm lining up the second one in the back row. And then here you'll see I'm going to peel up this mask, and then I will just trim that right down the center so I can attach half on either side of the mice in the front row. And then I can always place those back together again if I need to cover up a whole stamp. So I'm going to go ahead and color these off camera just for the sake of time, and I used my Prismacolor colored pencils for that. I will have all of the colors I used listed in my blog post. Here I'm going to add the Sentiment Fiesta Time, again using my Intense Black ink. And next I'm going to attach this frame, so I'm using little dots of multi-matte medium all around the edges, and then I will put just a few around the florals at the top and the bottom. For the inside of the card, I'm using the Sentiment Let's Party, and then I've also added that dancing mouse in the bottom right hand corner, and I'm going to stamp these using Distress Oxide Seedless Preserves. And I'm using a Nina card base, so I did not need to do an inside panel for that since it was already white. Here I'll take my front panel and I'll use my ATG gun to attach that to the front. And this is slightly off size, so I went ahead and attached it, leaving the border I wanted at the top. And then here I'm just going to take it to my trimmer and just trim it by eye until I have an even border. And that will complete card number 2. For card number 3, I'm going to use some of this fringe with the papers that came in the card kit. So I've gone ahead and cut out, I think I did 4 or 8 of each of the colors. And then for the front panel, I stamped out Happy Birthday up towards the top. And then while I had my stamps out, I went ahead and did the inside and added in the Sentiment Fiesta Time as well as the piñata. And I'm going to go ahead then and I will actually draw a line to the piñata so it looks like it's hanging. So starting off here, I'm taking the fringe and I'm attaching this using my ATG gun. And I'm folding that around. Now I eventually end up trimming the sides a bit because I had some white peeking through, but the whole way through I did just go ahead and wrap around the back, and then when I trimmed I peeled what was left off of the back. And I tried to keep a somewhat even layering of the fringe. So I started out and I just kept going green, blue, purple, green, blue, purple, and I knew that I wanted to end with a bow at the top using that lime green yellowy color of ribbon that came. So I wanted to keep that sort of same layering effect. And here you'll see I realized that I had moved the purple one up too far. So luckily I was able to take my heat gun. Since I had just put it down, I was worried because this mulberry paper is much thinner than cardstock. It's almost like a tissue paper, but I was very carefully able to peel that up and then move it down a little bit further, and it didn't even really mess up the fringe. So I got lucky with that one. And then I'm just going to continue this all the way up until I'm just underneath that happy birthday sentiment. And then here at that point, I was gonna add my bow, and that's when I realized I didn't like the way the fringe was laying on the edges. So I just trim a sliver off of each side. It really didn't make too much of a difference, but it did give the fringe a nicer edge along the sides there. Here I'm adding that line for the piñata on the inside, and I used a Memento Tuxedo black marker for that. And here you'll see I went ahead and added my front panel using my ATG gun, and then I added this inside panel. I did also color the piñata with a few Prismacolor colored pencils, and then I realized I forgot to add the bow, which was the whole point of planning the colors in the specific way that I did. So I again took my heat gun and was able to get that front panel off, added the bow, and I did go ahead and secure that in the middle with a glue dot, just like I did for the first one. I'll add some more ATG to the back of this and then place that back on the top of my card panel. And this panel is made from MFT's Limelight cardstock. And that will complete card number 3. For card number 4, I wanted to play around with the piñata die that I had picked up. So I'm starting off with a Nina panel trimmed to 4 by 5 1/4, and this is my first time using this paste, so I think it will get easier as I use it. I was trying to really space these out, and I ended up getting a little bit more gold on the background than I planned, but this is a Bow Bunny gold glitter paste, and so it's basically just a clear paste that has gold, very thin gold flecks in it, and you just spread it around with your palette knife like you would a texture paste and then let it dry. So while I'm letting that dry, I'm creating my little piñata, and I've cut out 2 of each color of the mulberry paper, and then for a sturdier background I did use a coordinating blue that I cut out of some cardstock, and this is Michael's cardstock that come in the packs with all the rainbows of the paper. And I should mention also the frames that I cut out, the purple that I trimmed down, as well as the pink that I used on the second card, those were also from Michael's cardstock packs. So what I'm doing here is I'm cutting these apart in layers because the way the die cuts it doesn't give you lots of fringe. There are a few pieces that would stick up, but I wanted to give this a lot more texture. So I'm trimming it in different layers, which are marked. They're sort of embossed when you run it through the cutter, but I'm trimming those off and then adding in some fringe just so that I can peel that up later and get some more texture. So I'm just cutting these down in different layers, and then what I'll end up doing is layer the mulberry paper on top of my blue cardstock. And here, yeah, now I'm ready to put it together. So I'm going to use some Nuvo glue, and that's just I didn't fringe that at all. And then I'm going to attach another layer where I have fringed the bottom layer. And I just continue working my way up, adding a little stripe of glue and placing the new layer on top of the old layer. And then I realized at this point that I forgot to cut out the eye portion, so I did go ahead and run through just the top portion of the die with a small piece of black and white cardstock. I added some tape behind that and then just placed those in the hole there. I'm going to take my panel now that it has dried, and I'll attach that to the front of my card base using some ATG gun. And I used MFT Tropical Teal for the card base. And then I took a action wobbler, and it was slightly too big, but I wanted to use the larger one so I could get some good action since this is a larger cutout. And I just trimmed off the corner and attached that to the back. And then I wanted to make it look like the piñata was kind of exploding. I had fooled around with the idea of maybe cutting the piñata, but I just didn't think it was going to look right. And I think having some candy floating around does give that idea, especially with the gold sparkle in the background. So I'm going to go ahead and take some multi-matte medium and then use my quick stick tool. I again just used some scrap cardstock to cut out the candies that came, this was included in with the piñata die, these small little candies. And I'll just place those around the front of my card base. Okay, so for the inside of my card, I kept this pretty simple. I went with the Sentiment Fiesta Time, again stamping that with my intense black ink, and then I used a few leftover pieces of candy and just scattered those around my sentiment. I'll go ahead and use my ATG gun then to attach that to the inside of my card base. There you can see that great action, and that will complete card number 4. For card number 5, I'm going to do a little bit of ink blending. So I'm working on Bristol Smooth cardstock trimmed to 4x5 1/4, and I'm using some Distress Oxide ink. For the sky, I'm just using one color, and that's Peacock Feather. And I am sort of letting that be deeper on the inside and then fading that out. I just used a piece of computer paper as well as some Post-it tape to create my line. And then I will flip everything over, and I'm going to do the same thing for the bottom to create my sand. And for that I used antique linen, and then I'm also adding in a little bit of wild honey to make that color a little bit deeper and to contrast really nicely with the blue. I did go ahead then and just give this a mist when it was finished so that I would get a little bit more texture. I didn't want a whole lot, but I did get a little bit of texture on top of the card base. Here I've got all of the cactus and the snake, and I'm going to stamp those out twice. I'll just use my intense black ink, and then once I'm happy with that, I'll flip the panel over so I don't have to worry with moving my stamps again. And this is Nina Solar White that I am stamping on. I went ahead again and colored those off camera with my Prismacolors. Again, the colors I used will be listed on my blog post for you. I'm going to touch down my front panel, and I am using a card base made from MFT Blue Raspberry. And then I'm going to lay out my scene, and this actually took me a little while, so you'll see I start to lay things out, and then it'll cut forward just slightly to the final, and then I will go ahead and attach those using some glue dots. Okay, so then for my sentiment, I'm going to go with Looking Sharp. I love those punny sentiments. And I'm going to stamp that using, again, my intense black ink. For the inside, I'm again using a Nina panel trimmed to 4x5 1/4. And I'm doing, again, a little bit of masking here. So I'm using Distress Oxide Peeled Paint. And I'm stamping that first cactus. And then I will go ahead and place that over top of my stamping, and I'm going to add 2 of the other cacti, and I'll again stamp those over top of my mask. And then I'll peel that away, and it looks like the other one's in front. To finish that off then, I'm going to add the sentiment Hola, and I'll stamp that again using intense black ink. Finally, I'm going to attach that on the inside of my card base. I can't remember if I mentioned or not, but this is, the card base is MFT Blue Raspberry cardstock. And that will complete card number 5. Here is a quick look back at the cards from today. You'll find additional photos as well as a full list of supplies at my blog post, linked in the description below. If you enjoyed the video, please leave me a comment or a thumbs up and subscribe for more. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.